you're joining us via YouTube and or something with a video, you will notice that we currently have mic stands.
Looks amazing. Looks so official.
Look at us.
It was It was very funny. I wish we had recorded the setup process.
That would have been funny. We should have done that. They were you think it's going to be very straightforward on the directions, which I mean it kind of was, but orienting takes a while.
It does.
Takes a while.
Now
But
you feel official.
we're here and we're not going to apologize for it.
Exactly.
Which is the topic for today.
So obviously you'll see the title is Sorry Not Sorry today. Full transparency, this podcast episode was going to be about something else today. But part of what we do is being real and authentic, and we're tired, and we both, I think, are like check engine lights turned on in terms of like compassion fatigue and a little bit of burnout this week. And so it was like midweek, and it was like, you know what? We're going to change the topic from something a little bit more technical to something that we know a lot about. Still technical, but it's a little bit easier to yap about.
Yeah. And that happens, right? Like you get to the moment. I know for me, I know when I'm burning out is when I can't find words.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I think that I need a break. So Sarah so kindly was like, you know what? Let's pivot. And I was
Ask
like,
for
"That
forgiveness
sounds
and
like
not
a
permission
great-"
with that one.
She's like, let's do something a little bit more fun. So today's going to be a fun one.
Yes.
Which I'm excited about.
So, okay, that brings us to like, how are you? Obviously, we're in March. We are in 2025. How's it going? Just like generally.
Yeah, generally good. Things are picking up.
Yeah.
I'm figuring out how to be like a full-time counselor again because I finally have a full caseload.
Sure.
So that's been interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah. Go us. Go grow. But so that's been a challenge, is working on like seeing all of these people again while also doing other things in the business.
Yeah.
But very rewarding time. Also, it's warm outside.
Yeah.
So my seasonal feelings, I'm not gonna say seasonal depression, but my seasonal feelings are going away
Right on.
because I don't like the cold.
I know.
But it is a stressful time, and it's that 3-month mark is typically when I start to feel like, and I need a break.
Sure.
So we're hitting that for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think similar. It was funny. I was making more bread this week, and I know I mentioned it to you, but my sourdough starter just like wasn't doing anything, because obviously like with starter it has to like rise and fall, and when it's at its highest rise, I'm sure you know, like you bake with it, but my starter just wouldn't rise, and it started to smell a little like acidic almost, which isn't going bad.
Okay.
It just means that it's really hungry and you have to feed it more.
Ooh.
And I was getting really frustrated with it. I promise there's this point to this. And I was like, my starter is tired. She's not working and she's just doing her best, but it's just not having it. But then I realized, I was not unlike my starter these last few weeks. So same thing, like, definitely feeling the fatigue. And I think it's one of those where like, it's the same thing as caseloads are filling up, but this is the first time that it's like, okay, how do you balance, full-time clients and full-time business owners?
Right.
And I noticed that the drive to overwork is a lot bigger now that we work for ourselves. So I'm just trying to like find a good balance and in between. Also, like, it's tax season,
Oh my gosh, yes, tax season, which is stressful. First time doing business taxes.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't be like, I'm feeling it because it's tax season. I'd normally be like, TurboTax, like that's my baddie right there. But
things change when you're an LLC and you're not just doing your individual and you're doing all these other things.
Navigating it. Figuring out. But again, like it's positive stress. I talk to clients a lot. There's positive stress, negative stress, and neutral stress. I think I'm just feeling a lot of positive stress. Yeah. And then I'm also feeling negative stress because I'm overworking. So like I can control that. So I gotta rein that back a little bit.
Yeah. And I will help with that.
Likewise.
While also trying to Yeah, Sarah, but right before we actually recorded, she was like, it's good to divvy up the load.
Yes.
What can I do? And I was like, I don't like asking for help. And she's like, we're in this together. So we both tend to go off and want to be like, we will conquer this on our own so the other one doesn't have to worry about it.
You can't do that when you own a business together.
Yeah.
So we gotta cut that out.
Yeah, we gotta work on that. But
we can do that in our personal lives though.
Right. First I'm like, take it, have it, figure it out. But in this,
here it's like, we'll figure it out.
hold you close while also keeping you from the stress. I don't know where I was going with that. I made you like a baby bird.
Well,
with that one.
I'm imagining a baby bird. It's fine.
Hold you
We share the
Mhm.
burden.
Yes, we do.
Of this practice that we love.
Right. And today, we're going to go a little bit into that about how we're unapologetically us, but also sometimes apologetically us, and where we've either given apologies that we didn't really mean or received apologies we didn't really mean, and vice versa, and all the things.
Because I feel like people call that out a lot of like, it just in general, like conversation of like, oh, like you're apologizing, or like, why are you apologizing so much? Or, hey, like, I'm looking for an apology. I feel like talking about saying I'm sorry is very normal, but people don't actually break down first of all, what an apology is, why it's there, and also like types of fake apologies. So I feel like, okay, I'm wondering, what is like the worst non-apology that you've ever gotten from somebody else?
So the worst non-apology that I've gotten was essentially like a blaming me for having feelings apology.
Oh, that's yeah.
Which
we'll label that later in our types of apologies.
Yes. And so that was probably my least favorite because it was I'm sorry that you're just so sensitive.
Ouch.
And I was like, okay. It's like, I don't understand.
It's not an apology at all.
Right. It's
that's
like
just mean.
It's like a stop being sensitive kind of thing. And
sure.
it's like, no, I'm not being sensitive. I'm just like having feelings, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's like probably my worst / not favorite was when I was told like, I'm sorry that you're just like being too sensitive about this.
Yeah. I would probably say the same. I think I've gotten like similar.
Have you?
Yeah. I'd say the same thing.
What about a apology that you gave that you did not mean?
Oh, I've absolutely done that. I think about planning a wedding.
Oh.
And that was my way of setting a boundary. In hindsight, I probably would have framed it differently, but at the same time, I was just like under a lot of stress, and I know I've talked about it, but like the planning was the easiest part. It was the people that were the hardest part, whether it was just like talking to a bunch of vendors while I was working full time, talking to loved ones and coordinating everything. So I will say there was a point where I remember it was like someone I like worked with. It was either someone I worked with or someone at the gym.
Yeah.
And they asked me a question, and I like pulled up a pic. Oh, they asked the colors everyone was wearing. And of course, by then I had like an image that I sent the florist of everybody in standing order and the dress colors that they were in to make sure all the flowers went together.
She's not at all type A, you guys.
No. I just really liked her colors.
The colors were gorgeous.
Thank you.
I love the color you picked for me.
Thank you. I matched it up with everyone's skin tones.
I know, it was perfectly done.
But it was one of those where like I had this image of everyone's colors lined up, and Parker's at the end. And so I had a bridesman as part of my wedding party. Wouldn't change a thing. He's one of the best people. Adore him. But the person talking to me was like, why is there a suit at the end of your bridal party? And I said, that's my bridesman, Parker. We have known each other since we were freshmen. And the person was like, I don't like that.
Whoa.
Keep in mind, this isn't a vendor. This isn't a loved one. This isn't a friend, family member, no one. This is just kind of a stranger giving me their unsolicited opinion. And I was just like, I'm sorry you feel that way. I wasn't sorry they felt that way. I would go to war for my bridesman. I still would.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where in the moment I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to go into this with you. We are out in public. No.
Also, what an odd thing to say.
So sometimes
just be like, I don't like that. It's like,
right.
Okay, I wasn't aware that this was your wedding.
I know. I was like, I'm sorry you feel that way. And that's all I said. And it was one of those where like, I think I used I'm sorry to divert a conversation. So I think that would be an apology I didn't mean, but I used.
Yeah. But like fair. Totally fair.
Yeah.
So mine is not as serious as that.
That's fine.
I'm sure that I have said it, but could not think of one, or I guess I could, but this one just was the most salient in my mind, and all of my tennis players who are listening. So there's this thing in tennis where for some reason we apologize sometimes when we win a point.
Oh,
but
so you're apologizing for like being successful, essentially.
Correct. And there's two that happen. One, if you hit the net and it like dribbles over the net,
sure,
you do like a sorry. But then another one, which is always been my favorite, is when you're playing doubles, sometimes singles, I suppose, and you hit them either with like an overhead or a volley, and you just say like, sorry, And I would say it all the time, and I'd be like, I'm not sorry. Because if we were playing doubles, like my doubles partner and I'd turn around and I'd be like, yes, and we'd high five about it. Especially if we did not necessarily enjoy the competitive spirit of the other person on that team, then we would aim directly at them. And once we would hit them, we would apologize and then cheer about it afterwards.
Okay.
So that was the one that just like stuck in my brain.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
Does that exist in men's tennis?
It does.
Okay.
And it doesn't.
Because I was curious, because like what you've said, because I really think about like, I mean, I'll go back into this later, but like being a woman, you apologize a lot. So I was wondering, like, is that in men's tennis too?
So some will, but they will not verbally do it. They might just do like a hand and like walk away. Whereas other men tennis players will actively cheer about it. We'll say like, come on, which some women do that as well. Like if we're like really pumped up.
Right.
But typically you do not do that because it's seen as like being unsportsmanlike kind of, which is, it's an unwritten rule because there's no rule that you can't cheer at whatever.
Sure.
But yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
I mean,
and it's supposed to be like a polite sport and like a, you know, gentlemanly sport, which is interesting that you're apologizing for winning a point and succeeding.
I was say, because if you think about it, sports are literally so that someone succeeds and someone might not.
Correct.
And we're like apologizing for advancing to the objective of the sport.
Right.
We need to have an episode just about sports. There's a lot we could unpack there.
Fun. Since we're both sports galleys.
I'll give you the reins on that one. But I will say, when I think about sorries, did you know Barbie has a YouTube channel?
No.
Wild. We're aging ourselves in this one. But Barbie is a content creator online. I'm not even kidding. I'll show it to you later.
Okay.
Barbie has social media. She's got TikTok, Instagram, and she's got a YouTube channel. And like her YouTube channel is literally like her vlogging. So animated Barbie vlogging. Definitely. Whoa, like
the Matrix.
I know. And it made me feel very, I don't want to say old, seasoned in life, because she has this video. It's literally called the sorry reflex that Barbie does. And I've sent it to just as many adults as I have teenagers and children. And it's literally Barbie. So it was honestly one of the most healing experiences I've ever had when I got to watch a video of Barbie telling me, you know, we live in a world where people apologize when they don't need to. And Barbie was like, next time you feel like you need to apologize, why don't you swap that for thank you?
Look at Barbie just like dishing out straight wisdom. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah. We talk about like trading your sorries for thank yous, but to hear it coming
from Barbie herself.
I would rather hear it from her than from me.
It was like when Steve from Blue's Clues got on TikTok during the pandemic, and he posted that picture of like, hey, are you okay? And I remember watching that in the like height of 2020, and I was like, I feel like Steve from Blue's Clues is holding my hands and asking me if I'm okay,
walking me through adulthood.
Because I was like, I'm not, Steve, I'm not okay.
I'm not okay. Wow. Okay, that's awesome. Also, just shout out to the actual Barbie movie.
Yes.
Oh my God. I know that was a while ago, but
it's still relevant.
Think about it all the time.
Yes. Well, and I think it brings up the fact that like a lot of sorries are brought up because of a lot of like systemic and societal ideals. And I think we just need to like push past that. And so when we say I'm sorry, just also asking yourself like, are we?
Right.
And first of all, it's okay if you're not sorry. I'm thinking about the Justin Bieber song right now and I want to sing it, but I won't because no one should have to hear that. But I think it just brings about like, okay, we really need to break down what different apologies look like. And so there's obviously sincere apologies.
Right.
That is a thing that absolutely has a very healing place and it should be there.
For sure.
But we have broken down fake apologies into, it's like 4 or 5 different categories.
Yeah.
So
5. Number 1.
Let me have it.
And she is the one that's talked about the most, and it's the gaslighting apology. So essentially that one's the, I'm sorry that you feel that way. which is kind of like my first,
Yeah.
not, like, oh, I'm just sorry you're so sensitive. It's essentially saying, like, I'm sorry, but you're the problem.
Yeah, I would say it's deflecting blame.
Yeah.
It's okay, the person who might have some accountability to take doesn't. And instead of just kind of deflecting, it's spinning it and then attacking somebody else. All under this guise of like, I'm being nice to you.
Yeah. Like, I'm being so sweet and telling you that I am so sorry that you're just, like, so messed up. And it's like, bro.
Yeah.
What? So, yeah, the gaslight special. I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
The gaslight special.
I worked hard on these.
I love them.
It reminds me of like going to like Wendy's and getting a cheeseburger. I'm
Can
like,
I have the gaslight special with a frozen Coke on the side?
extra crispy Coke.
Give me all the bubbles.
Please. And so our second one is, this one makes me laugh, the PR stunt. So it's like, this is not who I am. This is unlike me. And having that, like, truly someone is looking at a video camera and you can tell there's a script behind the camera. And it's like, okay, you know what? Whatever publicist wrote this for you. All right. Of like, this is not my character.
Yeah.
Like,
this should not define me, and I'm working to be better.
Yes.
Without any work to be better.
So again, deflecting responsibility.
Right.
We're going to see that as a common thread.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So number 3, the deflection. And this one is essentially just like, I was just under a whole lot of stress, and so I behaved out of that.
So just a straight up excuse.
Yeah, just straight up excuses. Because, okay, do we all have stress, and does that cause us to have extra feelings and want to behave in a certain way because of that stress/fear response?
Sure.
Of course. But do we have a choice in how we behave under stress?
That we do.
Yes, we do. So we're not saying that we do not respond differently when we're under stress, but we're saying, like, don't use it as an excuse.
Right.
Just, like, own it.
And I talk about apologies a lot, and people need to realize there's a difference between an explanation and an excuse. And this category of apology or fake apology of the deflection is, hey, that is an explanation, but you're using it as an excuse.
Right.
A way that you can actually turn that into a sincere apology is you can add context and saying, oh my goodness, I understand. I was under so much stress. I inappropriately spoke to you, or I may have just been really rude to you. Being under stress is never an excuse to treat someone like that. And I apologize.
Right.
So you can turn a deflection into a real apology real quick.
It's called ownership.
Yeah. Ownership and accountability.
Ownership and accountability. We love that.
It's tough, but.
And I want to call that out, actually, because this is totally going off script, but, like, let's do it. A lot of people assume that therapists get you in a room and just let you sit and, like, say and do whatever and don't hold any space for accountability.
That's very true.
That we're just like yes men. No. And are there some? I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I have not been around one, I don't think, actually.
I think a lot of like really burnt out therapists become yes people.
Yeah.
And they just kind of sit and let people listen.
Right.
And like wallow.
And so we're just going to take a moment to hold that is not what we do.
No, it's not.
Like, we are not just creating, like, sitting here like, yeah, totally. You definitely should have punched him in the face. Or you definitely should have attacked that person verbally. It's like, no, we're you know, we're going to sit with you and understand it and, like, talk about it, but also bring in space for, like, accountability of, like, okay, well, you know, what could we have done a little bit differently in that?
Well, and especially knowing that, like, that's when the relationship is so big and I know a few times, I'm sure you've done this too, is I'll look at a client and say, okay, I've been working with you long enough. I'm sensing a pattern here. What does it mean? And what do you think your role is in this cycle? And it's not to put blame on any client at all, but it's to say, like, hey, like, if this keeps happening and it's causing you distress, how can we hold ourselves accountable? Maybe it's the people that we're choosing to associate ourselves with. If you feel like you've got friend drama all the time and it's with different friends, what does that mean about maybe the people that are attracted to us and that we let into our life?
Right.
And of course, there's their own part of that too. But I agree. A lot of therapy is, I don't like to say calling it out, but bringing it in. Yeah. I'm just going to bring this into the room and just give you a different perspective and see how it lands.
Identifying and shining a light on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, though.
Number 4.
Ooh, the butt. the big butt.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm sorry, but. And so again, like, it's not actually apologizing. It's like, I'm sorry, but I thought I was right. And I'm sorry, but I thought I was doing the right thing. It's like, then you're not actually sorry.
Right.
You're just not admitting that things impacted someone in a way that maybe wasn't intended.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of like that excuse of like, here's my excuse for why this happened. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, totally. But also, like, I want to hear that, like, you actually care about my feelings and that you can prioritize the way that it impacted me.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Number 5. The passive aggressive classic.
Double quarter pounder with cheese.
Yeah, buddy. So this one, we're in the next question that we bring up. I'm going to go hard. But it's essentially saying, like, I'm sorry you didn't understand what I meant. I'm sorry that it just
passive aggressive. Honestly, just hearing you say that, I can honestly feel like in my body I was starting to get a little stressed because I remember times I've heard that in the past.
Yeah, it's the very much like whenever someone does one of these, I like notice like a hair flip of like, well, I'm just sorry that you just like couldn't understand that.
So it's like almost there's a power dynamic in this one. A very overt power dynamic. Okay. I feel like all of them kind of have them. Yeah. But this one especially, it's there and it's loud and clear.
It's like oh, well, I feel like I'm a little bit better than you because of this. And it's like, whoa. Okay. So then that actually leads me or us into my least favorite and or my favorite. And this one would be my least favorite of I cannot stand when someone gives me a passive-aggressive apology. Because it's like, okay, if something's happening here, like, let's just call it out. Which I think that's more being passive-aggressive for me is very hard because I tend to pride myself on trying to be very transparent. So when people are not open and vulnerable with me, then I'm like, I feel like something's happening.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah. But passive-aggressive apologies kind of make me feel like I'm dumb.
Yeah.
I think that's the feeling that I get a lot is that like I'm inferior, that I'm not smart enough to understand.
Sure.
And there's some trauma tied into that one with past experiences with people. So I think for me that's probably my least favorite, the one that hurts the most is when I get a passive aggressive apology.
Sure, absolutely. That's the one that almost just it cuts in a different way, and it can like cut into those like core beliefs about yourself too, and really tap into like the ooh, that's making me feel like I'm not enough right now. Yeah. Instead of like, wow, someone just had a bad day and took it out on me. Right. This one's a little bit deeper. Yeah. For sure.
Feels more intentionally hurtful.
Yes.
It might not be, but it definitely feels that way.
I think that's why like my least favorite out of all of these is the gaslight special. Because I also think about like a past relationship I was in. Yeah. And it was, first of all, I don't think the gaslighting was intentional. We just were not good for each other. Right. Very plainly. Just took a hot minute to figure that out. But it was this idea of like, I'm so sorry that I failed. You just didn't support me enough. And it was one of those where I was just like, okay, I need to do more. I need to be better. And I would like walk away thinking that I was the one that was in the wrong. We all have our things. And so I think it's I feel like those apologies are the ones that make you feel like you're just inadequate. Yeah. And I do think that brings up this idea that when we're breaking down apologies and like, sorry, not sorry, we do need to understand and make space for the fact that these scenarios often have a lot of depth for people, and it can really be triggering for folks. And a lot of the time, sorry is a trauma response as well. And it's the fawn response. Exactly. Yeah. It is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I got it. And so obviously we talk about like fight or flight, but there's also like freeze, fawn, what else? Fib. It was all the F's. Was that from our last one? We talked about that. Recent, we talked about all the F's. But yeah, a fawning response can include excessive apologies. Yeah. And so I think that if you ever see that in someone or in yourself, give yourself some grace of knowing that, first of all, if you're talking to someone and you're trying to dissect apologies, that there could be a trauma element to it. And within yourself. I know for me, I tend to fawn more than I realized I did, just to kind of keep the peace and avoid conflict for a long time. And so then I realized by like dissecting apologies of like, I'm actually not sorry for these things. I just wanted to feel a little bit safer. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Doing this thing because I definitely am a fawner. I apologize all the time, and then I don't sometimes, and y'all might feel this way too, of I don't even realize I am apologizing. It's almost like a habit of oh, I'm so sorry, especially being in the South. We're like raised so you got to respect your elders. And if someone's upset, then don't take up space, but then apologize. Like
immediately. And so it's almost like I don't even process that those words come out of my mouth until after I've said them. And I was like, whoa, I don't even remember what I was apologizing for, really.
Yeah.
I just felt like I impacted someone, so I needed to say that.
You know where I notice it the most in myself? It's so random. The grocery store is so random.
So with, like, strangers?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's like the idea, I know for me, it's taking up space. And I know we talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I will be in aisles looking for things. And just, like, me taking up space. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 1 second.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Be like, I'm sorry for taking up space in a public establishment.
Right.
I gotta say, you're not gonna like this.
Oh, no.
So Taylor Swift.
Just kidding.
Listen,
I love my Swifties.
Listen, you like Disney and I like Taylor Swift.
I know.
We can coexist.
That's a
Also, Taylor Swift is on Disney Plus.
She's really cool. I've learned to love her a lot more because of you and the other people in my life.
So she actually, in one of her documentaries, actually addresses sorry, and I just thought of it. At one point, she was like, I'm not going to say sorry for taking up space in my own apartment that I bought with my own money that I earned through my work. And I really think about that often, especially as we own a business now.
Yeah.
Of, I'm not going to apologize. Because I notice sometimes when I make direct questions, or I am a little bit more direct with people in business, they respond in a way I wouldn't expect. And I'm guessing an element of that might be because I'm a woman. And a lot of women don't speak directly. But the majority of business owners aren't women. So we kind of have to do that sometimes. And so it's this idea of like, hold on, no, like you're allowed to take up space. And I notice that in business and in the grocery store. So I really have to catch myself on that one.
Yeah. So this is going to be a fun one. Have you ever gotten just a truly ridiculous apology?
Probably. Yes, actually. Oh my gosh. It was in a relationship and something not so positive happened and I took the fault for it. The fault was not mine. So it was someone that didn't do well academically in a semester. And I had done so much of like bought a planner, grabbed all this person's like syllabi, put it in the planner. I was basically a student at 2 universities without doing their academic work.
Right.
Yeah. And they didn't follow through.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my goodness. First of all, I started with the apology of, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry I didn't follow up and I wasn't on top of your schoolwork.
I didn't follow up.
So that was what I will say. It's not a question you asked, but that was the most bogus apology I've ever given.
Right.
But what I got back was, well, I'm just so sorry you weren't in a position where you could prioritize this.
Where you could not prioritize my schoolwork for me.
So it was one of those where I was just like, okay. So I would say that was the most bogus. And luckily in the moment I was like, hold on, I think we're not meeting eye to eye here. So that was the wildest one. What about you?
Yeah. Mine was also in a past relationship. And mine was, without going into too much detail, of course, I really wanted to spend time with this person, like outside of a space.
Sure.
Where I had to sit silently and quietly. And so we were having a conversation of like, I'd really love to go and do stuff. Yeah. And maybe we could go to like a restaurant or go like on a date sometimes. Like that would be really cool. And my response was, well, you know, I'm just sorry that I'm so busy and like so successful right now that I don't have time to take you on dates.
It's the Gaslight special.
And I was
it's
like,
a number 2 with cheese.
Extra
I deserve crispy fries.
5 frozen Cokes with that one. And I was like, oh yeah, no, you're so right. And like that's the thing with gaslighting is essentially they're convincing you that you are in the wrong. And so I was like, yeah, I should not ask for that. So instead I just was like, okay, I will just sit here and listen to the TV in my headphones and sit in this apartment for every single weekend. So yeah, that was probably my truly ridiculous one, was saying like, I'm sorry that I don't have time for you because I'm so successful.
Because like, what do you say to that? You can't say like, oh, I'm sorry you're successful too. You can't say that. So I do think that brings up offering an apology and receiving an apology, it is a very powerful sentiment to make.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm really glad that we're breaking it down in this episode. Obviously, we've broken down types of fake apologies, but we'll also get into like a formula for making a good and healthy apology too. Because I think it brings up, there's a lot of like societal and systemic, considerations to an apology. There's trauma. There's a lot of impact that can be made from an apology, positive and negative. But especially the more that you think about it, the more it's like, wow, like those few words can make a massive impact. Just as much as something like I love you, I'm sorry can do just as much.
Right. Especially for those verbal affirmation peeps out there. And that's their love language of like having that apology is sometimes like that's going to get us to the point of breaking down that wall of, okay, let's continue. So like, when did apologies become so wild and, dare I say, potentially toxic sometimes in some situations? Like, what happened to make apologies become something completely different than what they were meant for?
Because I'm trying to think about like when I started to over apologize.
Yeah.
I don't remember when I started to. But I will say, and I credit my spouse to this wholeheartedly, like you said, like I don't realize when I'm apologizing too much. Yeah. I think it's like sadly something I've gotten so used to. And so what my husband will do is he'll start doing something similar, not to mock me, but because I'm always like aware of how he's doing and I want to like check on him. I'll look at him and I'll be like, hey, like you're really apologizing a lot today. Is everything okay? You seem just really critical. Or I'll be like, are you good? Like you're really hard on yourself today. And he'll look at me and he'll say like, hey, you're doing that. And so it's usually that helps like snap me back into it. Because especially like the way he says it, it's not like mocking or it's not like copycatting at all. It's more of like you see how this sounds when you are hearing it? Yeah. It's like, oh,
it's like flipping your light switch on. Of like, oh, dang. Yeah, that has been happening, I guess.
Very grateful for him for that.
Yeah. We love him.
He's wonderful. So I think let's kind of break that down into, I feel like a lot of apologies are a combination. And we can think about like accountability versus just like controlling our image. Because it sounds like the example you just said of like, I'm sorry I'm successful. That's not accountability. That's just, I want to have an image. Right. And keep it. Yeah. Under control.
And so speaking of image, I feel like that's where a lot of this can kind of stem from is from social media and those social outlets of, because we're seeing people speaking a lot more than like when we were kids. Like the only time that you heard someone speak was on TV or right in front of them, or like if you read a book or those things are important too, I suppose. But now social media, every day you can scroll and you can see someone talking about something. Yeah. And there's a chance for words to come out that maybe were not intended to come out in a certain way, but were taken in a very different way. And that's important. We're going to get into that later.
Well, it's also why that the category of the PR apology, I feel like it is so common now of just like seeing things on like YouTube or Instagram or stories of that, like it's either like a black screen on an Instagram story with just the text on it, or the Notes app. I will say people will screenshot their Notes app. I feel like it's all the time to the point where like I don't even notice it anymore. Yeah. So
a lot of that very much image. Like, yes, that image driven, the very much like, okay, I've got to show the world that like I didn't mean this. Yes. And sometimes that can come off inauthentic. Well,
and I feel like some people think of that like PR apology almost as like a get out of jail free card too. Of like, I said that. I offered an apology. It's like, wait, you didn't do that to take accountability. You did that to protect your image. And so I feel like, what do you feel like the difference would be then of like how to take that image control apology and move it into accountability? I feel like maybe there's action attached to it.
Yes. Like I would 100% say one, asking questions too is the beginning of like, what could I have done better? Sure. Like, okay, I want to understand this. How can I change? What would have been more beneficial for me to say? How can I get better at this? Doing your own research and then like action behind it. Oh, absolutely. Of not just like, okay, well, I'm sorry. But instead of, oh my goodness, okay, yeah, I'm so sorry. I recognize that there was a need here that I did not meet or that I said something that did not impact or land the way that I wanted it to. what could I do better the next time, and then actually do it.
Yeah.
Was a big part of
Follow
it.
through. It's like when we talk about setting boundaries, setting a boundary is half of it.
Yeah.
It's enforcing it and keeping it up. Because if you just say, oh, sorry, and you don't do anything about it, it's not actually an apology.
Right.
You're just using a word.
It's lip service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's image control. So, okay, that brings up kind of, have you ever seen someone apologize either publicly or like in your personal life and thought, yeah, they're not sorry at all. That's just not real.
So, my peeps listening, the school system happens all the time.
Sure.
Of the apologies.
Yeah.
A lot of times apologies from the higher ups down to people in the school system, or even sometimes like with teachers apologizing to parents for things, because the school, you do want everyone to feel safe, but there's also sometimes where people step into those situations and things happen and they're misconstrued in a way that like a teacher has to be like, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes they did not do anything wrong.
They're a middle person. They're just caught in the crossfire.
Right. And
collateral.
and so like the school system and honestly business spaces, spaces with lots of people in there, that's when I see a lot of those apologies of like, I don't really mean them, but I know that I'm supposed to, and I kind of have to do this in order to keep my job and also to make the higher ups happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's similar. When I think about that, I think about like a workplace setting where healthcare coverage was taken away. Yeah. And there was like I honestly, in those moments, I would have appreciated not having an apology. I would have just appreciated like, hey, we did this. We understand if it's inconvenient. We're here for you. We can be a resource. But it wasn't that. It was, we're sorry this change can be unsettling for people. Yeah. I didn't believe that, because at the end of the day, now I can say like it was probably a business decision. But saying I'm sorry in that way without any action, it just doesn't feel authentic. Right. So very similar.
Totally agree.
Very frequent in the healthcare systems, education systems.
Ain't that true? And it's interesting because in a lot of those spaces, there is not a lot of power from the people who are actually working within them, which is interesting that they're doing all of the apologizing.
I was going to say, when I think about it, I feel like the people with the most power are the ones that apologize the most. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you have power in any kind of scenario or circumstance, make sure you're aware of that and holding yourself accountable, because that will trickle down. And I know, especially, I wouldn't say this is power, but I notice it when I'm around children. I really want to make sure that I'm not over apologizing for taking up space, because kids are so malleable, and I would never want them to apologize just for being them. So why would I set that example? So the trickle down effect is real.
For sure. So we've talked a lot about what apologies aren't. Now let's talk about what apologies are.
Yes. So we're going to have like a little formula of ways that we can create a real apology. Yep. And the first step is, I would like to say it's simple, but it's not. It's admitting that you're wrong. Ooh. Which is so hard, because you really have to check yourself at the door, eat a big slice of humble pie. It is truly looking in the mirror and saying, I was wrong about this, and owning that.
Yes. And us perfectionists out there, this is one of the hardest things. Not because we think that we are perfect, but we are so afraid of not being perfect. Yes. That admitting like I did something quote unquote wrong, or I hurt someone's feelings, is like the worst. Right. So you want to just kind of ignore it and avoid it and be like, no, it's okay. Right. But in reality, that's just creating a source of disconnect.
Yeah. It's like sometimes it can be ego. Absolutely. But other times, like you said, like it can be about people pleasing and knowing like, oh my gosh, I may have hurt someone. I'm just not going to admit it. I'm not going to admit it. Right. I don't want to admit to myself that I hurt someone. Yeah. So I feel like this is a two-parter of admitting to yourself that you missed the mark, and also like you have to admit it to the person that's impacted as well.
Because like we're not going to sit here and say this is very comfortable. No, this is uncomfortable.
Very
it's uncomfortable to give a true, genuine apology.
It is,
because you have to take that responsibility. So number 2, acknowledge the impact, not just your intent. I don't know how many times in therapy I have said impact over intent. Impact over intent. Like, though we are intending something, that is not always what comes to fruition. So that impact is more important than our intent.
Right.
Because, like, if not, then what's the point?
Right, absolutely. And it's this idea of course, like having good intentions is always important. I think that shows someone's character at the end of the day, but so does the impact that you have on others. And it's really about, you could have a good intention, but if you aren't communicating well, if you aren't reading the room, if you aren't truly taking the other person or thing into consideration, your impact will not line up.
Right.
And so it's really kind of thinking about, okay, like, did I miss the mark, or are those things aligning, or what's going on? So I think that's a really valuable key. So obviously number 3, it is the explanation versus excuse, but it is you're not going to have an excuse or anything, and making sure that you hold yourself to that. Is you're not holding this sorry as emotional blackmail. This is not going to be leverage. This isn't going to be like a tit for tat moment. This is not keeping score. This is an apology.
Right.
Again, big old slice of humble pie here.
And then the last one, committing to the change.
The follow through.
Yes, the follow through. That this is not, these are not just words. It's not just lip service. That in reality, like, you are intending to create some form of change so that you can be better, do better for whoever, whatever the circumstance looks like. Like, it's important to not only acknowledge, oh, I did something wrong, but also, like, next time let's make a little change to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make the world a better place.
Again, it's enforcing it. It's keeping things up. It's the consistency, which, again, we are in a world of instant gratification. Not everybody likes consistency, but that is such a key part of our apologies. So we have our 4-step process of admitting that we're wrong, acknowledging the impact, the no excuses mentality, and committing to change long term. That is going to be our little apology sandwich and our true I'm sorry.
Yes. And what a great step by step. I know for me, because I am very, I don't think cerebral's the right word.
Visual?
Maybe. I don't know.
Organized,
logical. Yeah. Organized. I like to have like a process. I like to have a step.
You're logical. And structured.
Very
structured is a good one. I think of like, you like frameworks.
Yes. Which is interesting. That's taking me to my current hobby right now is paint by numbers. Like, I love to be creative, but like, I need the ability to have like, okay, you're supposed to color this in this one section.
Yes.
So it's like structured while also being creative. And that's what this is. It's like, make it your own. It's needs to come from like your own heart, who you are.
Yes.
But here's just like a little guideline to help with that.
So knowing that obviously sorries are very powerful, and we've talked about a little bit of like the negative impact of an I'm sorry. Has there ever been an apology that you've either, or let's say you've received, that you were like, they really meant that, and I really just felt it?
Yeah. There's a couple that come to mind.
That's a great thing, I will say.
I will say, and it's two people that I just love dearly. But I'm gonna pick on one, and she listens to our podcast avidly, so she's going to hear this.
Hi,
love you, girl. I'll probably text you right after and be like, I talked about you today. But something had happened 5 years like in the past, and just randomly we were talking and she started crying, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, I think about this time that I did this certain thing, and I'm not gonna say what it is, did this certain thing, and recognizing like I should have never done that, and you were so caring to drive down to me, and it just did not happen, and I am so sorry that I did not accept what was going on. And she apologized. She took ownership. She said it 5 years later. Well, she apologized like in the time as well, but like brought it up 5 years later. So I knew she was actively thinking about it, and I could see through her actions that she was making those changes and those adaptations. And she even said like, I should have never done that and put this person over you. And like, I'm so sorry. And I wish I could go back and I could change it again. And that, honestly, I was like, it's totally fine. Like, I was over it 5 years ago, but that was one that it just truly like touched me, because I knew that it bothered her to the point where she brought it up later, and I had already seen so many changes. But then even after that, she was like, can I go take you out for like lunch? And I was like, I mean, okay, like I'd love to just have lunch with you. Doesn't have to be for this. But I
think it also just shows that like, just putting forth the effort in this way means so much. And also like, there's no time limit.
No,
it can be delayed. It's okay.
Yeah.
Again, it's the impact.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh,
What about you?
I will say, and this is a funky one, and I was trying to think about it. I think one of the most sincere apologies I've gotten was grief related. And the person that apologized didn't actually do anything wrong. And I think that brings up a different element to saying I'm sorry. Yeah. It's because I remember I lost someone really important to me and really close to me. And I got a text from this person. So it wasn't even in person, which is odd to me that it felt so deep. But this person kind of texted me and said, hey, you're going to hear a lot of things after this loss. And I want to let you know, I am to my core. I am so sorry for what you've been through and how you will be impacted. And she kind of went by to say, like, I understand the depth that this impacts you, and I see you, and I'm here for you. Yeah. And it was one of those moments where I like had to check myself. And obviously it's grief. You get a lot of, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss. Here's a casserole. Like, here's a cupcake. I'm sorry you're sad. Yeah. But it was that moment of like, someone was saying, I'm so sorry you're suffering, but they weren't shutting it down. And I think it was that way. And I think that apology can also look really peaceful too, of like, I'm sorry you're in pain. It's okay if you're hurting, and I'm here for you. So I'd say that's an apology that I wasn't wronged by that person, but they were like kind of taking ownership for how I was feeling and wanting to sit in it with me. So
yeah, creating a space for you to just be.
Yeah, really helpful.
Not making you feel like you had to apologize for any feelings that you were currently having.
Right, because obviously I do that a lot. So it was a really good one. But I do think that on like a I've done something wrong kind of token of that, I think honestly most apologies that my husband gives me are really genuine, and I always like feel it with him. He's a very intentional human, and it usually lands. We've worked really hard to get to that point, but he's just like he's a good noodle at the end of the day. So in terms of those, I always feel that. And there's also like the longer term, like I'm going to commit to changing that if that has wronged you in any way. So I love that one.
Okay, so this next question, we've kind of tapped into it a little bit, but more specifically, has there ever been a time or a person even maybe that you apologize to and you realize afterwards like, oh, I did not mean any of that came out of my mouth. What just happened here?
I think about work a lot. I think about starting out. I do think that our graduate school education prepared us to be leaders, I will say, because it broke us. it really just got in there and broke us. But I do think that like it helped give us a lot of different perspectives on the world, and it encouraged us to speak up and have a voice. And when I took that into the workplace, it wasn't received well. And I remember a job I was at for several years that inspired me to connect with you and be like, we're going to change things up. I remember I constantly apologized for being successful. Yeah. And it was this idea of, oh my gosh, like clients really enjoyed what you said, or, oh my gosh, you just got this positive feedback on a survey that we sent out to clients. And I was like, oh, like, I'm so sorry. Like, but when I think back about it, I was like, no, like, and you think about it, and I didn't mean it. And if anything, I just didn't give myself credit where credit was due. What about you?
Definitely. Quite frankly, very often, just from being raised in a Southern household for sure. But more specifically, there's been a person that I would interact with where I was gaslit so much to an experience of like, I thought I was doing everything wrong. Yeah. So I apologized for everything. Like, I believe one time I made a noise, and I made like a bleh, you know, like the little vomit noise.
We make that noise all the time.
Right. Like fun noise.
It's fine.
This person did not like that noise. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then it then led into like a very long argument, which, you know, like that solidifies in my brain. There's something wrong with me, you know, like there's definitely something that I'm not doing this life right if I'm constantly like upsetting someone this much. And so I was constantly in this state of the cycle of, I'm so sorry, let me try and make it better. Then I would mess it up again, and then mess it up again. I'll put major quotes around that. And then back into the cycle of, oh, I'm so sorry, how can I make it better? That kind of thing. And it was just, talk about breaking down your self-esteem and like your self-worth and who you are. You know? So and that's a big thing that I've learned, is there are certain people that I do this more with. And then other people that I don't.
Yes, I agree. I'm
Yeah.
the same way. So then if we're thinking about it, what are some things that you want to be unapologetic about?
My feelings. Got real close to the mic.
You just
for that
really
one.
slumped over on that
My
one.
feelings. Yeah, my feelings. Like I want to be able to just have a feeling and it be okay and not have to apologize for it.
Or not have to back it up with like logic and facts.
Right.
Like it's okay if you just
or
have a feeling.
change anything with it. Like, and
Yeah.
okay, here's the thing. I'm going to caveat this with, I'm not talking about saying like, I'm mad and then break something and be like, I don't want to have to apologize.
Fine.
But instead of like, no, I'm not saying responding out of these feelings every time, but just being able to have them and express them and say, this is what I'm feeling.
Yes.
And not have to change them, not being judged by them of, well, you shouldn't feel that way.
Right.
Or, well, that, what could you change to make that better? It's like, no, I just want to have the feeling and let it be present and not apologize for it and just be like, that's where it is.
Yes.
And then move on.
I love it because it is tax season and it can be stressful to get through your first tax season owning a business.
Right.
And we will not apologize for being a little frizzle frazzled to get this done. It's fine.
Right.
There's no apology needed. It's stressful.
Yeah.
We're not going to break anything.
Maybe.
We may delay things once in a while, but like,
things.
but that's fine.
So that would be mine. It's
Yeah.
just like feelings. So just having my feelings, being unapologetically in the feels and
True.
being like, here's what it is.
Yeah.
So what about you?
Same thing as feelings. And I noticed that especially over this last like month or so, I'm too compartmentalized in my feelings a lot of the time, like very like rigidly compartmentalized. And I think that's kind of an occupational hazard that we have. And so I think that sometimes when I like actually like unpack the emotion that I've put into a box and sealed so intently, right. So much. I apologize for it. And I assume that like me expressing a feeling is burdening somebody else. If I communicate it in a certain way, it might. And so I obviously have to take accountability for that. But I do think that overall, like I apologize just for having emotions as a human. So same thing. I don't want to apologize for that. I also don't want to apologize for our success either.
Ooh.
Because that's the thing is like
tea.
we are really hardworking people to the point where we're both a little burnt out right now. We're just a little crispy. But that's okay. And we don't have to apologize for getting to this point.
Yeah.
Because we also know that this is also what makes us successful. So I think it's this idea of like, we don't have to apologize for working hard and achieving increments and levels of success that lead us to where we want to be. Obviously we haven't made our like giant goals, but we've made a good amount of them in between. And so this idea of like, we're not going to apologize unless it's to each other if we've done something a little wonky. But it's like, no, like we can enjoy it. We can take up space and we can also take days off.
Yeah, too. That's one of our things on our note list of goals is to take 2 days off.
Yes.
Which, this one right here definitely needs to
I definitely will.
in on.
But yeah,
we will.
Absolutely. So I think it's this idea of like, we can be unapologetic about being successful and working hard as long as it's not at the expense of ourselves.
Right.
So we got to find a balance.
Totally.
I love that. Well, as always, thank you for hanging out with us. Like we always say, if you are in need of immediate assistance, please give 911 a call or visit your closest emergency room. And if you want to work with us as therapists in that relationship, give us a shout. We are available at www.soulhavengeorgia.com. We're also on like every social media.
All the social medias. And we're trying to be real creative. So you guys like go hit it up. Like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the things.
Please.
Because we got some funny ones on there.
We do.
Not to toot our own
we won't apologize
and we
for
won't
it.
apologize for it, but they're kind of funny.
Yes.
So go check them out.
And also like look up Barbie's YouTube channel. It's the sorry reflex.
I'm probably going to do that like right after this as we're working on our taxes.
It's very healing for the inner child. But
inner child work.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out with us on Couch Convos, and we will see you next time.
See ya.